Hi, I'm Pat Martinez, the host of Conversations in the Round. I'm the president and CEO of Leadership in the Clouds, a consulting firm located in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a global footprint. We have locations across the United States, Puerto Rico, and other locations. So, for those of you joining me from those locations or abroad, welcome. And tonight I'm joined by fabulous individuals that are subject matter experts that are going to share a few insights, a few nuggets of wisdom that you can take as we discuss embracing well being. But first, I'd like to introduce those that are here with me. We're going to say round robin, take about a minute, and we're going to start with you, Sharon. Sharon, if you can just introduce yourself and just where you're calling from, because we know that you're not in some exotic place today, but you're in exotic, cold Charlotte like I am, which I wear my sweatshirt here. But just introduce yourself.
Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Sharon Nixon Crenshaw. I am the CEO of the Caregivers Empowerment Network. And what we do is we provide resources for anyone that's dealing with substance abuse, mental health, intellectual disabilities. We try to provide services and any type of resources that we need. Once we have an intake, see what your concerns are or however we can support you. That's what we do through the Caregivers Empowerment Network. And being a caregiver myself, being in this space for the last 10 years and focus on it the last 2 years after the pandemic has brought me to a point where I'm here available with the resources to help people that's especially the caregivers. And I am in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Sharon, for being with us. I'm going to pop over to Roger. Roger, take a few minutes and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Roger Seclupe. I am a social worker. I am the Bachelor of Social Work Program Director for the School of Social Work at UNC Charlotte. And I am also a grief counselor providing support for bereaved parents with an organization called Kindermorn. Just happy to be here. Appreciate the invite from Pat and looking forward to this conversation in the clouds.
You know, UNCC, I just want to say go 49ers. Sorry, I have to plug that in there because I have to do the commercial break for the university. But thank you, Roger, for being with me here. I'm going to switch over to Angie. We're going boy, girl, and that's the way it is. And then, Angie, would you take a moment and introduce yourself? And thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Pat, for having me and giving me this opportunity. Angie Vickers. I am the president for NAMI Cabarrus, which is part of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the world's largest grassroots organization dedicated to providing advocacy, support, resources, and outreach to increase awareness around mental illness and suicide prevention awareness. I found myself in this space after 30 years in the healthcare system and in nursing leadership when my youngest of three children was diagnosed with a severe and persistent mental illness. I also have lived experience with losing my middle child to suicide in 2021. So thank you for this opportunity to be here.
Thank you for being here. And you're also and you're in Cabarrus County. So
I'm in
it's right next
Cabarrus.
door. In case anybody doesn't know, we're in counties. We're Mecklenburg County. She's in Cabarrus. Now we're going to hop on over to Texas to my friend from Austin, Texas. Thank you so much, Dr. Nahida, for joining me here today. If you could take a moment, I know it's more than a minute, but if you can narrow down your experience over the many years of experience that you've had to 1 or 2 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here. Yes, I do have over 30 years of experience. I'm a counseling psychologist. I have worked in my private practice since 1995, and as Pat mentioned earlier, I also do a lot of consulting work now. I'm in the process of writing a book. Hopefully, will be published early in the spring sometime. It's called Awakening Your Authentic Self. And so I'm working hard on that. My background has been in universities and colleges, but most of my work has been in education. And I am proud to say I covered every aspect of education. I taught in elementary school, secondary school, middle school, high school, junior college, and I've been an adjunct instructor in several universities. So my specialty is anger management and domestic violence. And, there's always work in that field, unfortunately. But I enjoy it. I've learned how to use that for different populations, how to work with that. And so I feel like I can kind of jump in and pretty much hit the field of education and also the counseling aspects of that. So, yeah, I'm real happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Pat.
Thank you so much. Austin, Texas, I mean, is it warm over there? What's happening? I know it's cold over here in the Carolinas.
No, right now it's on 60s, so it's not too bad
Yeah, I'm
for
not
us.
feeling sad for you at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, thank you all for joining me here today. We are taking a journey. We're going to be talking about embracing mental wellness. It's important that we know their definitions and how we show up for business. So let's begin by knowing what we're talking about today. What I've done is I've taken the questions that I'm going to be asking this group of experts into five separate areas, and they are personal perspective, challenges and barriers, practical, strategies, impact and awareness, and last but not least, it's resources and support. At the end of the program, we're going to show some numbers in case you need them. You could reach out and just ask somebody for direction if you need to speak to somebody. I'm not it. Just want to let you know that I'm not the expert in this area. I'm not saying to call me, but you can call me and then I'll get you the number. But I will tell you that if you find yourself in crisis, you need to reach out to someone. Never ever say no one cares. The reason why we're
Mhm.
doing this today, and these five experts are with me, four experts, I consider myself an expert in a different area, because we care. If not, we wouldn't be here. And I don't know if everybody will agree with me, but I think that's it. Knowing these individuals are with me, yeah, that's it. So we're going to kick off the conversation. And I pose a question to Sharon. Let's begin with you. What does mental well-being mean to you personally? And then the second part of that question is, can you share a moment when prioritizing mental health made a significant difference in your life and work?
Thank you, Pat. Great question. For me, needs to me is actually it's just taking care of yourself and knowing that sometimes we all struggle. And I think one of the perspective is that people tend to shy away from even talking about mental health or mental awareness. And one of the things that we have to do is be open and know that we have to take the time for ourselves. And if it means meditating, if it means um just exercising or whatever, but the well-being part is we have to just take time for ourselves. And it doesn't matter if it's in our personal life or if it's in our business life.
And the second part of that question is, can you share a moment when prioritizing mental health made a significant difference in your life or work?
Yes, Pat. One time I was on this project and I felt very overwhelmed. And then finally I had to step back and say, hey, I cannot allow this project to consume me. So I had to ask the manager and say, hey, I need some downtime. Let me take the afternoon off. Tomorrow I'll come back with a fresh perspective and then
Mhm.
we'll be able to move forward. Because sometimes you have to do that. Because sometimes things can come at you, especially when you're on a demanding project. It can be extremely overwhelming at times. And sometimes we do have to take that step back just to clear our minds, clear our thoughts, and be more attentive and be able to be successful completing that project.
Thank you, Sharon. Roger, what does mental well-being relate to you? And then if you could share a time when you prioritized mental health made a significant difference in your life or work, especially in the
Absolutely.
work you do.
Absolutely. So I guess usually when I think of mental wellness, or excuse me, when I think of mental health and mental well-being, I think of mental wellness, right? So, and I come about it from the perspective of holistic wellness. So in order for me to know that, I am practicing positive mental wellness, I need to make sure that health-wise I'm also well. So I feel like they both go hand in hand. And so when I think of that concept of mental wellness, I add health to it. So health and mental wellness, or health and mental awareness. So trying to incorporate myself as a whole rather than split the two apart, if that makes sense.
It does,
And
it does. Yeah.
yeah, so again, it's like if you're taking care of your health, you're taking care of your mental wellness. If you're taking care of your mental wellness, you're taking care of your health. So it kind of encompasses both. Um, I'll be transparent. My mom passed away in 2021 and during COVID. Pat, you're aware of this. My mom was an incredible figure in my life, in my siblings' life, in a lot of people's lives. And, at that time, I had been providing support for bereaved parents for a long period of time with Kindermorn. And every Tuesday and Wednesday, when I would provide support, I would call my mom because it was about a 30-minute commute from my house to the Kindermorn house. And my mom was always so, um, I don't even know if it's enthusiastic, but she was always so supportive of the work that I was doing. And she would say, Mijo, it's so great that you are taking time out of your day to support other people, to support parents who've experienced this incredible loss in their lives that no parent should ever experience. When my mom passed away, I lost that go-to person that I could communicate with, right? And I was really struggling. I didn't know if I should continue to provide support for bereaved parents. But I sought support myself, and I made sure that I chatted with somebody about, is this something that I should continue to do or not? And perspective was brought to my attention.
Yeah.
It was something that they said about, it seemed like your mom had a significant influence in your work with other people, whether or not she knew it or not, it didn't matter. But even if she's not here physically, you can still provide that support for other people because it's something that she knows that that she's proud of you for continuing to do. And so I felt like that was really significant and helped me sort some things out for myself, and continue to do the work that I'm doing with parents at Kindermore.
Thank you for sharing that moment, Roger. I know it's very difficult, but this is the things that we need to share because everybody goes through pain. It's how we survive them and how we move forward. It's just the person that says that they're perfect, there's always something underlying that's not right. There's just life is just one struggle ahead of us. I'm going to switch over to Angie. Angie, if you can just share mental well-being mean to you personally? And the second part of that question was, can you share a moment that when you prioritize mental health and made a difference in your life or work?
Sure. So when I think of mental well-being, I think of balance between responsibility and rest, between caring for others and also caring for myself, and strength and vulnerability. Um, I think so. Just as Roger just mentioned, something that we are often teaching others is that mental health is the same as our physical health. We can't have one without the other. And that some of those things when I think of my mental well-being, such as healthy boundaries, self-care, having a sense of purpose. These are also areas that, something else we explain to people, individuals, is that we all have mental health. Mm-hmm. But we don't all have a mental health condition or mental illness. But at various points in our lives, most all of us have experienced those highs and lows. And I think the other part to that question is a time when I experienced
Loss.
Loss. And kind of I guess just really having to focus on my own mental well-being. So after 30 years working in critical care and the trauma ICU in Charlotte, so for 20 some years, saving lives, right? I was on the front lines, saving lives, critical care. And I experienced job loss that was associated with restructuring. And I at that time almost felt like I had lost my sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. So I struggled definitely initially with that. And it was from that moment, I really actually kind of started to focus on my own, those areas of mental health and well-being that as a critical care nurse, someone in a high stressed environment, and for most of us as caregivers, we don't take the time to fill our own cup because we're so busy taking care of everybody else. But so taking the time to actually kind of focus on my mental health and well-being. I actually went out to Colorado and trained as an integrative stress management instructor. And I can't tell you how important that all was, because in 2021, when we lost my middle child to suicide, at the age of 26, which was 6 days before his 27th birthday, which also fell on Mother's Day that year. It was very difficult because all of those things that I had learned and I had been teaching and reinforcing with others was very difficult for me to even consider or think about. So since that time, again, just it is these things with mental well-being and focusing on healthy boundaries and self-care that have just been really critical and essential.
Angie, thank you for sharing those personal moments with us. But job loss is something that most people can understand. Loss of an individual, grief. How do you stand up and go on? It's like you pick yourself up and you start all over again. It's hard. Sometimes people don't, and it's okay to grieve. And grief doesn't just say, okay, you have 30 days to grieve, and that's it.
Correct.
After that moment, it's done. No, it doesn't. Like I think, Roger, you and I had a conversation. I'm sorry, Dr. Nahida, I'll go over to you in a moment. Um, that we had that conversation. Grief doesn't just stop. So people have to understand. So Angie, thank you for that. And Dr. Nahida, um, I
Yeah.
want to pose this question to you. What does mental well-being mean to you personally? And can you share a moment when prioritizing mental health made a significant difference in your life and work?
Yeah, I think my other, if I can call them colleagues now, have mentioned some great things that we can do. What
And
mental
by the way,
well,
you can call them colleagues.
yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, I think we all identify with physical health usually and say we need to stay healthy physically, and we don't always think about how important well-being is or wellness, right? And so that's an important task as well. As a matter of fact, it's got to be a daily exercise as well. That is what makes it difficult. That when we don't pay attention to that, just like the physical self, we begin to, notice it right away. And sometimes well-being has to be that way too. We have to maintain that constant nurturing of ourselves as far as our mental health. And so the way I do it, I sometimes is I have a list. I actually have a daily list of things that I need to be doing or be part of to feel better about myself. And it can be just, having a conversation with my friends, with my family, reading my favorite book, just making sure I drink enough water to keep myself healthy in terms of that, because we know that the mind and the body is connected, of course. But so I think the difficulty is that we don't see it as well as we see physical health. So the mind is also as important. Now, how that's affected me in the past, some of you don't know, maybe most of you don't know, but I had acquired cancer 20 some years ago, 22, 23 years ago. And then I was okay for a while. And then he came back about 3 years ago. So now I'm going through some treatments. But luckily, a lot of the stuff that I teach my clients and talk to about crisis with others and so forth, I have to apply to myself. And the thing is that that same list that I keep every day, as a matter of fact, it's sitting right here by my desk right now. I have a checklist and I do check it.
Okay.
Some of it has to do with physical stuff. A lot of it has to do with mental health, because that is traumatic. We experience trauma, if you want to call it that, or crisis or difficulties every day. And the thing is that we have to implement our health and our self-care. So I've been doing this. As a matter of fact, just last Thursday, I went for another MRI. I've been going through a bunch of MRIs. And every time I get the report, I say, okay, I have to do certain things to maintain that. And luckily, I have been maintaining it well. I'm still under treatment. And people see me and they say, oh, he looks good. He looks healthy. But I may look healthy physically many times, but the mental health is something that is also important. And that when they see me being as lively as other people, they that's well-being. That's what they see, and that's what I feel. So I have to do my part. That's right.
Thank you for sharing that moment in your life. I know that it's not easy. And I just want to say to everybody that's listening to us, we have different perspectives coming through. But the balance that you're talking about, just like when we find work-life balance, there is no balance. It's whatever works for you. It's whatever
Mhm.
works for you. You're listening, and this is what they're sharing. If you notice what everybody is sharing here and their perspectives are different. And now we're going to go to challenges and barriers. And I'm going to start with you, Roger. You know, Roger, what is the biggest misconception about mental health in our community? And then the second part is, what do you think? Why do you think stigma around mental health still exists? And how can we break it?
Those are really great questions. And I do want to thank my colleagues for sharing and just being transparent and just for sharing stories about themselves, about their life experiences. And it really means a lot to me that we can have that communal space here and to be open and honest about things, right? And
Mhm.
it sort of pitches into the questions that you just asked about. And then I'll go backwards, right? You asked about stigma around mental wellness. I feel like at times, it depends on where we grow up. It depends on culture as well. It also depends on, geographical setting, our family, like all that plays into the stigma that surrounds mental wellness, or at least addressing it or talking about it. In some families, you don't talk about your feelings, right? So it could
Mhm.
be generational. In some communities, you don't talk about your feelings because it could mean life or death, right? So there's a lot of variables here that are involved. One of the biggest things that we can do to help break that cycle, break the stigma of mental wellness is by having these types of conversations, right? Being open, reaching out to all individuals, right? Not just the youth, because I feel like, yes, we should connect with youth and have them have spaces where they can openly talk about their mental wellness, but also individuals who are aging, right? I think there's ways to talk about this that doesn't bring shame to people. And, one of the biggest misconceptions about mental wellness in our communities is that if you talk about it, that means there's quote unquote something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that is a huge misconception. There's nothing wrong with having feelings. There's nothing wrong with going through experiences. That's what happens to us as we grow, as we develop, as we encounter people in our lives or situations and circumstances. So this misconception of if you're experiencing quote unquote a mental crisis, then there's something wrong with you. And
Mhm.
we need to do a better job at countering that narrative and changing the narrative and creating a narrative that isn't shameful, or that doesn't make others feel shame because they're experiencing feelings or because they're just having life experiences. And at times, those life experiences can overwhelm us. They can make us feel like we are being pulled, right? And so I would just say that, and I'm sure there's other things that my colleagues are going to talk about as well, but I'll just pause and see what my colleagues have to say.
You know, um, I just wanted the viewers to understand, look at who's here. We have a variety of backgrounds here. But also in my background, I remember growing up and my one cousin or several cousins, they were called Rarita. Leave her alone. She's a little special. Well, what does that mean, special? So I'm Puerto Rican, whether it's African American, Caucasian, Latino, Mexican, or where are you from, Roger? I'm sorry. Where's your family from?
As my family's from Peru.
Peru. So no matter where you're coming from, and 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 Dr. Nahid, you're Mexican American?
Mexican American, and I actually do counseling in both English and Spanish,
Oh,
and
yeah. I
yeah,
just
so
want, no matter what culture we're from, what I'm saying is that what Roger said is very interesting because
exactly.
it's how you bring that with you. And those things are, no matter what you do, you have to be progressive. And having these conversations do help. So thank you, Roger, for sharing. I'm going to switch over to Angie. I'm going to pose the same question to you, Angie. Um, what is the biggest misconception about mental health in our communities? You work with the community all the time. What do you think stigma around mental health? Why does it still exist? And how can we break it?
I guess the biggest question, as you mentioned, is what is the biggest misconception, which is really hard to answer because there are several misconceptions out there. When I think of some of those misconceptions around mental well-being, one of the ones I think is that the perception that mental illness is rare, and mental health challenges are extremely common. Actually, 1 in 5 adults lives with some type of mental health challenge, right? Mental health struggle, and 1 in 6 children, and those numbers have gone up. So it's now starting to hear that it's more 1 in 5 adults, and 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 5 youth or children, and it isn't always visible. Another misconception that I think we're hearing, especially here recently, right, is that people with mental illness are dangerous. And the reality is that people with mental health conditions are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. Another misconception is that talking about mental health will make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things, if we think about it, are kind of what leads to the stigma that we experience. We tend to hear that, well, if somebody has a mental illness, that's obvious, right? We would be able to see that. And when I think about stigma, because of the work that we are doing through NAMI Cabarrus, which we are in all communities, we are doing work in the Hispanic Latin American community, the Black African ancestry communities, the FaithNet communities. I have volunteers and board members from all of those areas. And so through that lived experience and hearing firsthand, we know that stigma still exists today. We've heard in some communities, we just need to pray harder, or that you just need to man up and be strong, right? Showing that you need help is a sign of weakness, which is why suicide is the highest amongst males, right? Suicide has become the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 24 today. It's the highest it's ever been. So I love what Roger has said too, because we need to break down these barriers. We need to break the stigma, and we need to create the conversation and the environment where people know that it's actually a sign of strength to reach out for help, that it's okay to not be okay. And that, like you said, Pat, we care. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing the work that we do, and that we want to help more people be able to get the care that they need. And that it shouldn't take, it shouldn't take what it does today to get somebody that help. In addition, as we said before, mental health is the same as physical health. However, when we think about what that care looks like, it looks very different. And so that's the other piece of the environment that we need to kind of change is how that care looks, so that it's regardless of what type of care we're seeking or receiving, that we're receiving all of that with care and compassion. So,
care and compassion, you're talking my language here. Dr. Nahida, before we go over, I'm going to come back. Angie, please, I'm going to ask you a question about those figures that you gave. I think all of you are in the space of data collection. So that'll be a question at the end. I'll ask about data. Dr. Nahida, please, if you can, what's the biggest misconception about mental health in our communities? You deal with so many different communities, whether they're children, aging adults, whatever it may be, in college. What do you think the stigma about mental health why does it still exist, and how can we break it?
Well, I think it's because, well, part of it is because people, again, feel that something's wrong with them, right? And they don't get the help they need. But the other part of it is that other people think there's something wrong with that person, and they don't know how to help. And we're therapists, and we are trained to help in a professional way, but anybody can help. And when other people don't help and shy away from helping others, that sort of perpetuates the issue, of course, because then everybody believes that they cannot help someone and that they can't help themselves and so forth. So really, it's a combination of situations that are going on. And so it starts with being open about it, okay, in terms of your own example. We can become an example to others by talking about that. Now, somebody mentioned men a while ago. And that's true. We men have more problems with that, about being open, not just about our physical selves, but also about our mental health.
I just want to put
And
a disclaimer out there. I don't want to hear emails from the men population that are listening, but Dr. Nahara is correct in what he's saying. He is a man saying that the men have some problems. So, but it's just
yeah,
it's a cultural thing. Expand on that, please, a little bit.
yeah. Well, I mean, yes, it is. I mean, we're brought up from the very beginning that we should not express our hurt, that we shouldn't cry, that we are strong, that we should be competitive and assertive, and all these things. And that's a false narrative, right? And so we hurt ourselves by doing that, and then we perpetuate that by trying to be that way. I mean, I have a chapter that hopefully you all will be able to see it later on if I can publish this book soon enough. It's called Dysfunctional Men, and it speaks about all that,
Mhm.
about how we are contaminated by social I guess, ideas that are out there. And I use that word because it's people can identify with that. When you get contaminated by something, you are then not functioning at your best. So anyway, it's about this function, and we have to be good examples of how we deal with something that's not functioning well. And when I'm not functioning well, I have to be that example of how I handle that. So that's I don't know if I answered both questions at once or not, but that
You
is what
did, you
I
did.
feel about that.
When we talk about dysfunctionality for everybody that's watching and listening to us, it's different levels, I would say. What may seem okay to you may not be okay to somebody else, the same way that with anything else. So if you do need help, I just want to take a little moment to say, reach out to someone, get the help that you need. It's not okay to say, I'm not feeling well and I can't tell anybody. It's okay to talk to somebody. Reach out. And I think everybody here will agree with that. So I'm going to, before we go into the next question, Sharon, I want to pose to you the same question. What is the biggest misconception about mental health in our community? And why do you think that the stigma still is there about mental health? And why does it still exist? And how can we break it?
Thank you, Pat. I think the misconception, especially in our community, is people see it as weakness. They see it as weakness and they don't take the time to reach out. And as Angie said previously, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to reach out to someone for help. And I know for me growing up, even though we had mental health, we had family members that was dealing with mental health issues, but it was
Mm-hmm.
more of a hush hush thing. No one actually wanted to talk about it. But as I got older, I had to bring it to the forefront. It's like, hey, this person has a problem here. They have an issue here. We need to address it. Unfortunately, there is so many resources out there. And I want to say to Angie, I just learned about your organization probably within this last year. I didn't even know it existed. But just the resources that your organization provide, whether especially with mental health, I think is phenomenal. And another thing, Pat, is we as being in this position to help support people, for me,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I try to pride myself in is educating myself on the different resources that's out there and available because I want to be able to help you depending on what your situation is. I want to be able to provide resources for you. And I think it's about education. It's about educating yourself on the resources out there and available. And I know, Pat, you said at the end you're going to provide some numbers
Mm-hmm.
that people can actually reach out to. And I think that's phenomenal because here's the thing. There is people out here that need help. Number one, they don't know the questions to ask. And number two, they don't know where to start. So I
Mm-hmm.
think having this platform here opens up the door for us to have more conversations about mental well-being so that we can help others and help ourselves as well.
Sharon, you deal with caregivers, and as a caregiver, I took care of my mom, and then I had my in-laws, and then my children. My daughter was born premature. There's a lot. There's a lot of things that we all have to handle. We have to carry, and there's times that we feel like we're about to break. So as a caregiver, we'll come back to a resource, but I just want to put that plug in, that pin in you, that I'm going to ask you that question as a caregiver. What's a resource that we can do? You talk about, and I think Angie was the one that used the cup. When you're half full, fill your cup before you fill anybody else. It's like when you're on the airplane. They always say, if you haven't been on an airplane, listen to me now. The thing falls, the air falls down. What do they say? Put the mask on first before you put on to anybody else. Whether it's your child, you put your mask on first and then you help somebody else. So you always have to take care of number one. So I want to come back to that when we come back to resources for you, Sharon. I'm going to kick it up to Angie. Angie, what are some simple everyday practices that can help mental well-being? And then the second part question is, how can leaders create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace?
Thank you, Pat. I love these questions because my work in the healthcare system also included, I was the nurse manager over the integrative department with Atrium for several years. And so I became a holistic nurse several years back. And so for me, it's easy to help also kind of teach people actually those practices that I never did very well at myself. But so some of the things that I try to teach people that are simple everyday practices that they can help to help do to help maintain that mental well-being include focusing on breath work and whether that is just focusing on some box breathing, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 breaths. I teach a lot of people about the 5 things that you just kind of take yourself out into nature, focus on 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Is something very easy. Things that mindfulness and meditation is that's a practice that it doesn't really cost anything with today's social media networks. If we focus on the wellness pyramid, right? I think somebody mentioned this earlier, just focusing on our diet and nutrition, right? Just focusing on the nutritional aspect, movement, incorporating movement in your day. So if you're moving 30 minutes after a meal, but truly, if we focus on that gut brain connection, we are going to help overall our mental well-being. Just in response to doing that. And I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of forest bathing. So 2019, I went out west, right? And somebody mentioned forest bathing, and I thought they were talking about, taking bar of soap and a towel out in the woods and bathing, when it's actually immersing yourself just in nature. And so that's actually one of my favorite things to do. That second part of the question, how can leaders create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace? As a leader, most of my career, I was in leadership and received actually an award called the Hallmark of a Healthy Work Environment. And so creating that culture is an area that I'm very passionate about. I think today, we actually, even through NAMI, we have a presentation we can do for those in the workspace, navigating a mental health crisis in the workplace, right? How do we create a culture where we are using safe language, right? So the things that we are saying to others around us are creating a space where people feel comfortable in, if they are struggling, that they can talk about it to somebody. Putting those resources in place so that whether you as a leader know how to help lead somebody to help, or whether any of your employees, right? So anyone in the workspace, because if somebody would have asked me 20 years ago if I had, any lived experience with mental illness, I probably would have replied no, at that moment in time. But my experience today, I say at some point, everybody has some type of experience, whether through themselves, a family member, a friend, or just somebody in their community. They may or may not know it, but so it's so important by just creating those spaces where people are feel comfortable and don't feel shamed or like they're weak if they talk about that they're struggling and that they need help.
Struggling is it's such a word that we just use it, but sometimes the struggle, the word itself, can be so detrimental to someone because identify struggling is, some people say, well, I'm getting through, but to somebody else, you're struggling. But some
Right.
people just get through and
Yes.
they just do it.
And I have that lived experience as well, because as a leader, I was the only manager in a 1,000-bed hospital with 2 ICUs.
Mhm.
I had just had my 3rd child, and I thought if somebody knew some of the struggles that I had. So I went in every day with a smile on my face, right?
That's right.
Strong. Like I was taught, the oldest of five, like you're strong, right? But at behind those doors, right, I was struggling. And
I
so,
always say that you never know that you might be the only smile that person has. So when you see somebody, say hello. Act kindness, kindness, arc. Act
yes.
of random kindness, I always say. You never know if that's the last smile that you gave somebody. That's the only smile that they'll get. So I'm going to switch over to you, Dr. Nahida, and pose the same questions. What are some of the simple everyday practices that help maintain mental well-being, and how can leaders create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace?
Um, I've been retired for a while now. I retired in 2016. But during that time that I was working, I actually was working two jobs. And I've always been in the field of education and mental health and so forth. And so, even though people say, I love what I do, I love my work, I think many of us do love what we do, but it still creates stress, whether we love what we do or not. And so in the workplace, we need to be aware that while I'm doing what I love, what I do, I still need to take care of myself. And a lot of people retire, and because they've been working too hard, even though they love what they do, they die right after that because they have not learned to be able to take care of themselves along the way. And then they leave and they don't know how to do that. So,
Because
I
their
mean,
work is everything, correct?
right.
That's their
And
life.
yeah. And the thing is that anything to an extreme, even if it's a good thing, it's bad. And if you don't do it at all, it's bad. If you do it too much, it's bad. It can be a problem. So balance, someone mentioned about balance earlier. That's exactly right. Okay. In terms of leadership, yeah, leaders aren't just made because you've been there for a long time. Yeah, the way I see it is this way. I need to be a good follower first. And if I follow someone that I know is giving me what I need, that person is enthusiastic about what they do. They know how to communicate with others. They know how to pass their information to others and partake and all that. That is what I have to do first. Every leader had to be a good follower. And so, people like to talk about leaders and they don't talk too much about the followers. I mean, we always give the quarterback the all the acclamations, what do you call it? All
The accolades.
the
Yep.
accolades. That's what I'm
Yep.
trying to say. But it was a team effort. And the
Yep.
thing is that we say he's a great leader or she's a great leader. And the thing is, were they good followers to begin with?
Yep.
And to be a good follower, you have to do the things that you know are supposed to be done on a daily basis. So, yeah, I've been called a leader a lot. And it's only because I had been a good follower first. And I associate with people that, uh, you know, provide me with the goodness of life. So that's what I have to say
Wow,
about that.
I like that. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower, which is true. Part of my class that we teach that because you have to be able to listen, and a good leader
Yeah.
knows how to pass it on.
Let
So
me say, let,
you
let me
live by example, correct?
Yeah, let me add this. I mean, one of the things I do with my clients is, you got to be a good disciple. And a disciple is someone that follows. Who are they following? A master, right? And so a disciple also, I try to use words so people can understand things. It's related to being disciplined.
Hmm.
So discipline means you have to do things consistently and so forth. So if you want to be a good leader, I tell them, be a good disciple first, be a good
Hmm.
follower, and consistently do what you know is right. And eventually you look back and there's a bunch of people following you because you become a leader.
And you need a bigger car. So thank you so much. Sharon, I'd like to hear your perspective on one of the simple practices, everyday practices that'll help mental well-being. And also, as a leader, how can a leader create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace? You've worked in different varieties. You've worked in hospitals, corporate America, nonprofit. What are you seeing?
one of the things, Pat, I see is the opportunity to, hmm, to just open up, have a space where we can open up and share, even in the workspace. I think we have to, as leaders, have a space where your constituents are able to come
Mhm.
and open up to you about what they have going on. I also think that there is a place where mentally you have to bring yourself to a space where you're able to share what's going on with you. Let me have the second question again, Pat.
The second question was, and you started talking about it, how can leaders create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace?
And
You
I just
started
say
talking
it's
about safety, and I
yeah,
think that's what I heard was safety.
yeah, and it's
Because
a
not
safe
everybody
space.
feels safe when they talk about these things.
Absolutely. Just creating a safe space where everyone can come and talk to you. Because I know for me, during the pandemic, I worked at a COVID hospital. And as
Mhm.
my staff was having issues at home and just with their children and just being afraid of coming into the
Mhm.
hospital on a daily basis,
Mhm.
one of the things that I asked them to come in my office individually, one at a time, and just share with me what their thoughts were. If they was afraid, if they felt like we didn't have enough PPE, or if we didn't have protocols in place where they feel that they was protected. So just having that open space for allowing them to come in. So as leaders, I think one of the things that we can do is have an open space so someone can come and talk to. For me, anytime I'm in a role where I'm a manager or managing a project, one of the things that I do is just have an open door policy where anyone at any time can come into my office and we can have a conversation. Sometimes it gets really personal,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just to have a conversation to help you get through the day.
In the space that we're in, as you know, um, I'll take a sidebar here before I go off to Roger. We do management consulting work. Everything that we talk to our clients is confidential
Correct.
because people need to feel safe, be able to unravel the background and take apart that yarn, that ball of yarn that's been wound so tightly, and or peel the onion as they call it. Peel the onion one layer at a time. And sometimes it's very difficult. And some people don't want to peel the onion all the way, but you give them enough information that'll be able to move on. So, Roger, I'm going to thank you, Sharon, for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
Roger, I'm going to ask you, what are some simple everyday practices that can help with mental health well-being? And then how can leaders create a culture that supports mental health in the workplace?
So
I know you work at the university, but it's still a workplace.
it is. So I believe these three components, and there are more that my colleagues shared as well that are excellent. One of them is having awareness, right? So awareness, it can be challenging at times. I
Mhm.
myself do not want to be aware of something that I may or may not be doing the right way, right? So I think that's one of the components, just having awareness. Secondly, giving yourself grace, right? So giving yourself grace through things that are challenging, and then rejoicing in the things that are going well, but giving yourself grace when things aren't going well. And that segues into just keeping in mind that you're doing the best that you can with what you have at the moment, right? And I'm sure that all of us can attest to that. There have been moments that we're just doing the best that we can with what we have, with the resources that we have, or just with our patience, et cetera, like fill in the blank, right? So those three components, and again, there are others, but I feel like those can be very helpful in maintaining this sense of mental wellness, right? As a leader, I feel like it's I've been in leadership positions, and know that leaders tend have been on both sides, right? So leaders tend to often like to um, talk things through or
Mhm.
work out an issue, or let's talk about it. Sometimes folks just need somebody to listen to them,
Mhm.
right? And so I feel like, and this could go to, it coincides with the previous question as well, is find find people who can listen to you, who just have time to just listen to you. And as a leader, be okay with just listening, because sometimes that's all that needs to happen, right? Sometimes things don't need to be fixed. Sometimes somebody just needs to talk about what's happening, not to have somebody talk to them about what's happening, if that makes sense. There's a book,
Yes, it does. It goes
there's,
back to your mom, how you used to call her
yeah,
on the
exactly.
phone. I'm sure she probably gave her 2 cents at the end. Mijo, keep going where you're going, but she listened.
She absolutely listened. There's actually a book. It's called The Rabbit Listened. I'm not sure if y'all are aware of that book.
What's
I
it
found
called?
The Rabbit Listened,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about a child who went through something very challenging and difficult. It was difficult for everybody's difficult is different, right? So we can't compare difficultness, right? Whatever you're struggling with, whatever your challenge is, that's yours. I can't say that it's less difficult than mine because it's very different. So this book, it's about a child who's going through something very challenging, and everybody, well, they're animals. Every animal that comes to try to help him wants to fix it for him or wants to talk about it or is offering solutions that don't really match what was happening. And at the end, this rabbit comes and just sits there and listens to the child. And it's a beautiful book. It's a book that
Wow.
it's utilized. So Kingdom Morn utilizes it with children because we also work with children as well. And we've also incorporated it with working with some of our parents. So again, it's a beautiful story. If y'all get a chance to look it up, it's called The Rabbit Listened. Once you read it, you'll get what I was talking about. So
It's amazing how, depending on I mean, I'm older, I'm not a child, but I still like those books because I think that they convey a message. As a writer of books, and my Patty Puerto Rican books are coming out, it's how do you translate something so that you can start the pipeline of leadership at a younger age? So you're a grief counselor. This book is right there, not only for kids, but also for parents. So thank you for sharing that. Um, you talked about awareness. We're going to be switching over to impact and awareness. And Dr. Nahara Israel, we're going to kick it off with you. And the first question is a two-part question. How does mental health affect productivity and relationships? And what role does social media play in shaping mental health, positive or negative? I know that social media is a hot button for everybody when it comes to mental health, but what's your perspective on that?
Um, I we can't divorce ourselves from relationships and being around others. And so, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I mean, the healthier you are, the healthier somebody else could be. Because what I strive for is helping myself first, as you were talking about the situation in the airplane, before I can help somebody else. And so, we're not going to get away from relationships, and relationships are difficult sometimes.
Mhm.
And the reason I think that most of us, when we start relationships, we want to meet the right person, right? We want to meet somebody that's going to fulfill me and so forth. And what we don't realize is that everyone has issues, right? And so the thing is that I need to be aware, and maybe some of you have already thought about this, that we don't always attract each other because of our good side, our good qualities. We also attract each other because of our negatives and our deficiencies at times that are subconsciously going on in ourselves and in the other person. And those sometimes bring us together because if I'm insecure, I'll probably find someone that's insecure in some other way as well. So the thing is that relationships are not always easy. And so it's part of our lives. And so, and the most important relationship really is the relationship with myself. And so we don't think about that. I think I want to have a great relationship with that person, but I don't think about I want to have a great relationship with me. And in order to do that, that is very difficult. That's a more difficult thing because you have to look at what are not just my good qualities, what are my deficiencies as well.
So,
And
social media, how does that play into it? Because mental health, we have a lot of social media fans. I'm one. Um, but then if you read, it can impact you negatively. So, what's the role of social media play in mental health, positive or negative?
well, I think in social media, we people like to present their best side. And we see this I guess picture of people out there, and we don't see the negatives again. So I think that social media can be beneficial because of connections, but we got to realize that when we're connecting through social media, I'm actually connecting with this probably this facade of this person, but not the real authentic self. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in my book. It's the authentic who is this person really? And so social media is beneficial in terms of making connections, but we need to be careful about what we're connecting with. And many times, like I said, the connection I have with one person, there's something brewing within me that makes me
Hmm.
connect with that person. So so I'm not against social media. I think social media like I said, is good for making networking and all those kinds of things. But we need to also realize that what we see is many times not what we get. And but I need to be looking at how can I improve myself.
So, Sharon, I'm going to pop it over to you. How does mental health affect productivity and relationships? And also that question about social media. What role does social media play in shaping mental health, positive or negative?
For me, Pat, the social media, I think it can be a two double-headed sword. I think that on one side, the connections, the opportunities that can provide when you make connection with someone on social media, and then also the negative part of this, the question was, um, is bullying because there has been a lot of social
Hmm.
media bullying, and I think that just hearing the statistics on the news, a lot of suicide attempts or suicide has been associated with social media. Whether in as my colleague stated, it's as he stated, like it can be a good at one point, and then at the second time it can be negative because what you see is not always what you get. There's people
Hmm.
out there portraying to live this luxurious life, and then you have someone else looking at their life and just feeling like their life is not meeting life expectation. So at
Right.
that point, that's where the negativity come in on social media. And like I say, I've seen it and I've heard it on the news so much about social media having a big impact in mental health,
Hmm.
especially with young teenagers. They're seeing, like I said, all of this activity and everything going on social media, and they just don't feel like their life can meet this expectation. Um, yeah.
So, when you talk about young folks, it's very it's a double-edged sword, as you said. You got to take it with the good and the bad. So I'm going to pop it over to Roger. Roger, how does mental health affect productivity and relationships? You see students, you're interacting with them at the college, at the university, then you're going to parents in the more in the afternoon, and you're doing grief counseling. What role does social media play in shaping mental health, positive or negative?
Those are two great questions. You know, not addressing your mental wellness can have such a significant impact, not only on your work or school productivity and relationships, but other factors that surround your life, right? So it impacts your health. And we talked about that earlier, this concept of health and mental wellness being connected, right? And so addressing it will have so many benefits, right? Not addressing it, we'll start seeing some of those pitfalls, right? That
Hmm.
occur if it's not addressed properly. One of the social media. All right, so we'll talk about that. It's technology is not going away. Technology is just
Hmm.
getting better and better, right? Whereas a lot of folks, we can view two things can exist and be true. Um, at the same time, even though they're opposing, right? So, if you think about it, like on one hand, yes, there's so much that we can say positive about social media. It's a connector, right? You think about networking, right? Social media does offer that opportunity for folks to network. Think about LinkedIn and how folks have been able to expand, their I'm going back old school, expand their Rolodex, right?
Yeah.
To have so many people that they can bounce ideas off of or just learn what other people are doing, right? On the other hand, social media can have it can be a challenge for folks, especially because it was mentioned earlier by a couple of our colleagues here. People are going to portray the quote unquote good things that are happening in life. You
Hmm.
know, no one's going to portray, take it back. Few people are going to portray the challenges that are experienced in life to
Hmm.
social media where millions of people can view it. That's being vulnerable. And we as a society, we don't like to be vulnerable, right? We want to keep it within.
And
And,
also, Roger, would you agree that when we see someone being truthful and saying, look at all the pills I'm taking, or look what I look like as I'm in the hospital, don't we say, why are you doing it? You're making yourself vulnerable.
well,
That's the reaction. I
it
know I have it. Like,
right.
what are you doing?
Well, it depends, right? Depends on the viewer. There are some people out there who they'll find a connector. There's
Mm,
empathy. Like there's something that they find a common ground with that individual who is posting that where they can say, "Oh my gosh, I've been in that situation," or "Oh my goodness, I know where they're coming from," right? Or I have some familiarity with that. So yes and no to that because there may be some folks who could say like, "Oh my gosh, why are they posting this? How can they put themselves out there?" But there could be other folks who say, "Oh my gosh, why are they posting that?" It 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 resonates with them if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, it
And
does.
and so yeah, again, social media there are some strengths to social media. There's also some challenges, and I feel like we need to do a better job at finding the common ground in it. Because we can't just say social media needs to go away. It's one, it's not going to
Not,
go away. So
no, it's
how do
not.
we lean into it? How do we
Yeah.
utilize social media for the
Yeah.
the things that we need to happen with mental wellness and mental health awareness?
It's not going away. We have to prepare not only our children, our adults, our aging community. They say, oh, I don't want to talk about AI. It's a reality. I know that I got my first computer in 1987. I'm dating myself, and AI was there. I mean, internet, think about it, was the big hot button for the longest, and then now it's AI. Angie, I'm going to round it off with you on this question. How does mental health affect productivity and relationships? And what role does social media play in shaping mental health, positive or negative?
Thanks, Pat. So I think again, so when we talk about mental health and how it affects productivity, it's important to recognize there's two sides to that. So when our mental health is strong, what we're going to see in productivity is we're going to see improved productivity, more focus and decision making is, improved. Motivation feels stronger, people miss fewer days, whether that's work or school. However, when mental health is struggling, that's when we will probably see, uh, lower morale in the
Mm-hmm.
in the environment. You may see a higher number of days missed. You're going to see lower productivity because the reality is that if people's mental health is struggling, there was something we learned was that if you have one bad apple, right, that one bad apple can ruin the whole basket, right, the whole team. So it, regardless if you recognize it or not, that is going to have a ripple effect and will affect more of the other parts of the team. So when somebody's calling out, that's affecting the rest of the team because they're having to work harder, right? um, I think and productivity was something I started way back in the day. So we didn't measure productivity back then. But as we started measuring productivity and collecting more of that data, like we mentioned earlier, um, it's really important. And I think what we're seeing today, so as you mentioned with social media, I agree with everything everyone has said so far. I think there are some, obviously there are benefits to the social media aspect, the connection, you know, uh, learning opportunities, right? That there's so much people we can learn from just going to that social media and internet an expanded network of individuals. But at the same time, I think social media and AI can also affect not just the productivity, but the relationships. What I
Mm-hmm.
tend to see is this space where people hide behind like the communication isn't taking place, right? And so people are saying things regardless of what the consequences might be, whether that's on somebody else's mental health, right? You'll it's interesting because sometimes I'll see some type of post, right? And you start reading the comments, and it's amazing what people are putting in comments, right? Like they might have no idea who this person is, but saying very hurtful things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we are now seeing, if you ask me, the consequences from
Mm-hmm.
where we are today with AI and social media as it relates to the overall mental health and well-being of our communities, starting with at a very, very young age, all the way up through, the elderly.
Yeah.
We're starting to see the impact that somebody mentioned suicide. Something that I've learned is that people are actually going to the social media and it's teaching people how to end their life. It's so there's definitely multiple aspects of, when we think of social media and technology today. And I also tend to think of, so back in the day when they first came out with that Apple computer, I remember a
Yeah.
nurse saying, I sat down at the computer and like 3 hours later, I hadn't done anything else. So now that we have it on our phones, our tablets, our iPads, right? Everywhere, it's everywhere. What we're lacking is that human connection, that face to
Mm.
face communication, that you don't know somebody's story. So just be kind, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what I see with regards as it relates to those things.
Social media is a double-edged sword. It's good and it's bad. I use it. I'm one of those people that I'm a social media hound. I get up and do my social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't do Twitter, and I choose not to do TikTok. I choose, and the company doesn't do it. But we use it, like Roger said, LinkedIn is very important. We have a job that's open there for jobs and things like that. But I think all of you touched on it. You have to be careful. You have to keep that balance on no matter what you do, is that your mental health, you have to guard it. It's your responsibility. Um, I don't want to quote her, but let them, that book, Let Them by Mel Robbins. She put it into context. Everybody knows it. It's just that she allowed you to say, let them be. Because there's some people you can't change, some people that will not change, some people that can change but decide not to change. They like where they are. And there are people that will change no matter what. So, depending on how the wind is blowing, that some people will be there and some people will fight the wind and some people will put a coat. It's just you have so many different types of people. So I
She
want
was
to
the
thank you
keynote.
all. I know that there's another question I wanted to ask you about resources. I'm going to go around really quickly and ask you just one resource that you would share and support. Dr. Nehera, what's one resource that you would share for folks?
I have been in many different organizations, and I think I don't want to mention just one specific, but some of the ones that I think people need to get involved with more is youth organizations, because that's where it begins. And so, if we can be a part of a youth organization, and I started really doing a lot of counseling before I was even a counselor, because I work with uh, adolescents in trouble, with what at that time was called delinquent kids, right? In this halfway homes. And so that's why I started getting my interest in helping not just children, but then it went into young adults and then, college students and so forth. So I would promote the involvement of working with youth, because there's time to help them before it gets even worse. So that's what I would recommend. Hearing.
I think you're muted, Pat.
You're on mute.
Who's mute?
Pat's on mute.
Oh, okay. Did you all hear what I said?
Yeah, we heard you. Yes.
Okay. Uh,
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Pat, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm on mute. I'm
Yeah, you
sorry.
yeah, you kept you
Hello.
kept you
Wait.
kept muting
One,
us.
two, three. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, Roger, the same question. What resources or tools would you recommend to someone that's struggling with stress or anxiety?
Well, I appreciate the comment about reaching out to organizations that support youth because absolutely we need to support our youth. They are because they are the future. For me, I always tell students, I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing at some point, and I want to
Hmm.
make sure that I am mentoring and modeling the next wave of clinicians and social workers who are going to come in and professors, right? So I feel like that mindset is important. Obviously, our great colleague here with NAMI, Angie, I would say reaching out to organizations like NAMI, right? So
Hmm.
there's an abundance of resources there. Mental Health America of Central Carolina is another organization that I strongly support as well. Anywhere and any place that provides resources that links communities to have access, right? I would encourage folks to volunteer, especially because as a volunteer, you will be in a position that perhaps community members don't know about. And as a volunteer, you're giving your time to be that bridge for that
Hmm.
community. And so I just encourage that. Anything and everything related to mental health awareness and connection, I say folks should do.
And Angie, I'm going to leave you for last, but Sharon, any thoughts that you have on resources or tools to recommend, especially for caregivers? We have a rise in people that are caring for others. What's what suggestions would you have to have them who are struggling with stress or anxiety? Where could they turn to? Where can they turn to?
One organization is AARP. They have a wonderful caregiving network that supports the caregivers. And secondly, I would like to recommend the 988 hotline. The 988 hotline is a national hotline where you can text, where you can dial in, and they will provide you with resources anytime that you're struggling. And you just need to talk to someone, you feel that you're at your last wits. Dial 988. Someone will be able to speak with you, and you can text the number as well, and they will provide you with mental health support and any type of support that you need.
Mm. Thank you for that. I appreciate it because we're all caregivers of one somebody or not, and sometimes we're at a wit's end. And culturally, we say we can't speak to our tia or tío or tell anybody. We should be able to have an outlet that we can turn to. And Angie, I'm going to end it with you with sharing any resources or tools for people struggling with anxiety or stress. As far as NAMI is concerned, your wealth of knowledge there and resources.
Thank you, Pat. So I guess for me, one of the agencies that comes to mind firsthand is NAMI. And again, so there's three different levels. There's NAMI National website for across the entire United States. There's 48 states with a NAMI state organization, and then every state has a number of affiliates in it. But when I think of the opportunity to help somebody, whether they're struggling with stress or anxiety or any other type of mental health condition, one of the things that I love that we're able to do is we have resources and from every age, from like kindergarten all the way up through the elderly, that we have programs and presentations and classes that fit the needs of universities and colleges, high schools and middle schools. And then even, again, the workplace, every community, there's just so many different things. And one of the things that I believe is so critical that we're able to do when we connect with those individuals is connecting them with these other resources throughout the community. So as Roger mentioned, Mental Health America, many people don't know about 988, and that's something that we talk about in almost every support group we hold, class that we present. We're educating the community about these resources. 211. Many people don't know about United Way's 211 that can help connect people with resources throughout the community. And having lived experience, having had two children that struggled with their mental health from a very, very young age, I was very surprised because it was only 2 days before discharge after a 6 week stay in a behavioral health facility. And it was only because the DA who was maintaining that hospital stay happened to mention to me, asked me if I had ever heard of NAMI. Otherwise, we had not heard about any resources. And so since that time, I have just been just in, in awe at so many resources within the community. And that's one of the things that we do is just that networking and partnering. And as we learn more about all these different organizations, whether that's a caregiver network, you know, different organizations that are providing support, resources, counseling. The more that we know, the more that we can help encourage and teach others.
No, thank you, Angie. Thank you, all of you, Roger, Israel. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and Sharon. I know, Israel, you're coming a different time zone, so thank you for being here. Mental health, mental well-being, we say embracing mental well-being. It's difficult. Not everybody embraces it, but just know that you're not alone. And that's why we're here. You're not alone. So, as president and CEO of Leadership in the Clouds, and also these individuals that are here with me, I thank you for joining us today and for letting us share a couple of nuggets of wisdom, some strategies, and also some resources that you can use, or maybe pass it on to someone that you see has anxiety or stress or is going through a hard time. We're all there at one point or another. And if not, bless you. You're blessed. But also look behind you, look in front of you, look next to you. Not everybody's right there where you are. If you are, pay it forward every day. Every day. Pay it forward. So thank you for joining us here at Conversations in the Round. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Israel. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Angie, for being here. And we made it. And those resources will be at the end. So thank you for being with us.